Hi, my name is Catherine, and today I'm presenting my integrative project for the U of A Certificate in Sustainability. I'll get into the details of my project in a minute, but today I'll just basically be doing a review of information that I've gathered from a tour of the Edmonton Waste Management Center. My project is titled Rethinking Waste, a Sustainable Approach, and I'm excited to share it with you. Okay, just to give a bit of context for why I'm doing this project, this is a super quick introduction about me. So I'm just finishing up my Bachelor of Science in both Biology and Earth and Atmospheric Science, and I've also been completing this certificate of sustainability alongside my degree. As you can see, I spent as much time as I can outside, just kind of exploring Canada's beautiful places, and I've become very passionate about protecting these places. Anthropogenic waste is becoming quite a threat to these pristine areas, so this project has been a powerful way for me to kind of combine both my education and my personal experience and hobbies. I think it's really important for everyone to learn about sustainability just as a whole. These kinds of problems impact everyone, so hopefully I can share some useful information today. Before I get into the details of my project, I want to lay a clear foundation for the concept of sustainability itself. There's many different definitions of sustainability out there, and each can kind of apply to a different scenario. So this definition here is the one that I found to fit best with my work, and it was set by the UN. So it states that sustainability is the concept of meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In sustainability, there are kind of three main pillars, so social, environmental, and economic, and I'm going to touch on concepts from each pillar throughout my presentation. So resource management and environmental protection would fall under the environmental pillar, things like education under the societal pillar, and something like an operating cost would fall under the economic pillar. So this Venn diagram on the right is from a great paper that suggests a happy medium, so a balance between all three pillars will give us the most sustainable scenario. If one pillar is neglected, or even two, sustainability isn't achieved to the extent that it could be. Okay, waste management is important for a few pretty obvious reasons, like protecting the environment and preventing excess pollution. But here I've listed two other reasons that we might not always think of. So first is the conservation of resources. Efficient waste management systems can recover valuable materials that can be reused, and that contributes to a circular economy. In a neat paper by Khosravani et al., they found that this ultimately leads to economic benefits because the costs associated with waste disposal are actually reduced. A second reason is public health. So proper waste management minimizes the spread of diseases and does that by minimizing places that diseases and its vectors like rodents can breed, feed, and just live. So there's many more reasons to support effective waste management, but I thought these were interesting and just set kind of a good stage for the importance of sustainability, which obviously is intertwined with waste management. Now that we have a good understanding of sustainability, I'm going to get into the background and the details of my project. Concepts of sustainability will be kind of discussed through these details, so keep those ideas in mind. Okay, I've always had a personal interest in what happens to the waste that I put out for collection. Like, does it stay in Edmonton? Does it get shipped somewhere else in the world? When I recycle, is that actually a sustainable action? So to answer these questions for myself, I took a tour of the Edmonton Waste Management Facility, which is shown on the right here just from an aerial perspective. My hope is that other Edmontonians have shared some of these questions that I had, or even just want to know how to be more sustainable in just their daily lives. So my goal is to answer some important questions, and I'm especially going to dive into some actions that we can take to improve the sustainability and just overall operation of the Edmonton Waste Management Center. This facility is very cool and it's based around us, so it has to process whatever we send to it, and it's our tax dollars that pay for its operation. So it's really in our best interest to know what goes on here and what we can do to help it run smoothly. Edmonton's Waste Management Center is a pretty large space that houses many waste processing facilities. The garbage, recycling, and food scraps that are collected from Edmonton homes are all brought directly here by collection trucks. So these pictures here are both ones that I took during my tour of the facility, and I think a lot can be learned just from these photos themselves. In the top, you can see the collection trucks delivering household waste to this just big unsorted pile, and this is the general garbage that you put in those big black bins at home. Some sorting happens here, so for example, some materials are recovered and used in garbage fluff. That's a cool product that I'll talk about more in a minute. The bottom photo is one that I had took right after a collection truck had delivered a big load of recycling to the facility. And this all goes into a big building where machines selectively pick out things like the cardboards, the plastics, and metals and just separate them all out. Then humans do a double check sort on just a conveyor belt. Poor sorting though, so for example, putting something into the recycling that's not recyclable, like say in my home I put rotten food into the recycling, that can make it really difficult to sort on site, and that increases processing costs. And we are the ones who pay for those costs with our taxes. Something cool that was pointed out to me in this bottom photo here was the composition of this recycling. So the main material that's recycled these days is cardboard, and this picture reflects that pretty well. I was told that this has been due to a huge increase in online shopping recently. So a little lesson here is to always buy locally instead of online if you have the option. Lots of the cardboard used as packaging for online shopping is also pretty low quality, and that makes it quite worthless in terms of recycling. These posters here published by the City of Edmonton are a really great resource to make sure that you're putting the right material in the right place. So I won't go through these today, but check them out on the City of Edmonton website if you're at home sorting your waste and you're ever confused about what goes where. To give some context for just how sustainable Edmonton's current waste management system is, I'm going to just very briefly discuss some history of waste management in Edmonton, as well as what we might be able to expect in the future. A standout example of Edmonton's history in waste management is the Grierson Hill dump. This dump was active from 1894 until the 1940s, and quite literally everything was dumped here, from metals to foods to oils. If you're from Edmonton, you probably recognize this location, and you can also probably think of a few issues with this situation. So that is Hotel McDonald on the hill up there, and the dump was right below it on the bank of the river. So that in itself was an issue. Harmful materials were able to leach directly into the river, and there were also some problems with bank stability. Smells were also an issue right in the middle of the city, as you can imagine. And the homeless population started forming communities here, which became quite a health hazard for them. Pictures of this dump and some information are actually on display at the current Waste Management Center, so it's pretty interesting to see the history versus how far we've come in sustainable waste management. When talking about sustainability, it's very important to address the future. Like, what can we do to improve? At the Edmonton Waste Management Center, they're doing some great things to improve sustainability, and I'm going to go over a couple of them here. So first, I'll talk about something called garbage fluff, which I briefly mentioned earlier. You can see what it looks like in the photo that I took on the right. This is just a dry, carbon-rich feedstock that's produced from municipal solid waste. So it can contain a few things: demolition materials, non-compostable garbage, so stuff that you'd put into the black bins at home, and some recyclables like cardboard. This product is created right at the Edmonton Waste Management Centre, and it's sold to companies who then use it as a fuel source. So it's a real win-win. Less material ends up in the landfills, and an effective source of fuel can be used instead of something like coal. My second point is composting. So in the top Google Earth image of the Edmonton Waste Management Centre, you can see kind of long dark lines, and they're in that blue circle. So those are piles of organic waste. So basically the material that you put into the green compost bins at home. They're just left to sit there, and they decompose for a while, like up to a few years, and they end up as excellent fertilizer that citizens of Edmonton can just use. This system keeps a lot of material out of the landfill, and that minimizes costs just because it's much cheaper for material to sit there naturally than for it to be processed. While it's sitting there, this material actually also produces a ton of heat during decomposition, and this can be used as biofuel, which some of you may have heard of. These are all great strategies, but the future ultimately relies on us. So as consumers and the producers of waste, it's up to us to minimize that. So next, I'll get into a few things that we can implement into our daily lives to achieve this. Okay, we've all heard of reduce, reuse, recycle, but how effectively do we usually actually implement this? Lots of people think that if they're recycling their cardboard or their plastic, then they're probably leading a pretty sustainable lifestyle. And while recycling is great, we can see from this pyramid diagram that it should definitely not be our only strategy. In this diagram, the ways of managing waste are listed in order of most to least preferred or sustainable. So this is called the Zero Waste Framework, and the City of Edmonton is working to get citizens on board with it. This is basically a step-by-step guide for how to rethink your waste management and to therefore prioritize sustainability. So I'm just going to go over each level quickly. The most sustainable option is to rethink or redesign. This means to support the design of products and systems that minimize waste and therefore support a circular economy. So for example, just purchase products that have been made out of recycled materials. Essentially, just really think about what it is that you're purchasing before you purchase it. Next is reduce. This speaks for itself. Preventing waste at the source is a pretty obvious way to minimize how much waste you produce. A good example of this would be purchasing products with minimal packaging. Like your fresh veggies don't need to be in a massive plastic package. Next is the concept of reusing, which everyone is also probably familiar with. A great way to implement reusing is to purchase pre-owned items, also repairing your own items to extend their life. Then we have recycling and composting. So both of these strategies turn waste into a new product that can therefore be used again. Make the most of the city's recycling and compost programs because they are already there and ready for us to use. So refer to the city's What Goes Where poster that I showed to learn how to recycle and to compost effectively. Recover is the next level, which refers to mechanical and biological processes that can recover additional materials from waste that can't be recycled or composted. So this is kind of an extra level to recycling and composting. That's how you can think of it. And it includes recovering energy from waste. Finally, at the bottom is residuals management. So there's always some waste that cannot be recycled, composted, or recovered as energy, and responsible management of this waste is very important because inevitably there will be some of it. However, we want for this to be the very last resort. Maybe one day we can minimize this unusable waste to the point where there isn't any, and we don't have to worry about managing it, but obviously right now that is not the case, so it's important to consider it. In addition to the strategies associated with that zero waste framework, Here are just a few really easy things that you can implement into your daily life, and these will help you lead a more sustainable life pretty simply. So first, don't use a bag to catch the trimmings when you're cutting your lawn. There's actually several benefits to doing this. The clippings add nutrients to your soil and reduce the need for watering and fertilizer use. Leaving them also means that you don't have to bag them and put them out for yard waste collection, and that all takes resources. There's the bag, the greenhouse gases associated from the collection truck, and etc. Another simple trick is to reduce food waste by planning your meals ahead of time, as well as your grocery shopping trips. And this also saves you money, especially now that food is so expensive. So there's kind of two types of food waste. There's the avoidable, and that's stuff like rotten food that we just don't get to eat. And the unavoidable, so things that we generally don't eat at all, like banana peels. So planning your grocery trips will help reduce this avoidable food waste, keeping it out of the waste management center. So you don't want to buy a whole bunch of apples if you don't like apples, and you're not going to end up eating them because they are just going to rot and become this avoidable food waste. So this pyramid chart gives a couple of good suggestions for what to do with food waste before composting it. So composting it should kind of be the last resort. You can do things like donate it or feed it to animals. Another cool thing I learned during my tour is that it's not best practice to put your yard clippings into the green compost bin. Yard waste goes into a separate pile that undergoes much less processing than food compost on site. So to decrease pressure on the composting facilities, you should actually put your yard waste out on these special yard collection days. This will also help decrease processing costs. Finally, if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend taking a tour of the Edmonton Waste Management Center yourself. I actually really loved it, and anyone can do it. They have public tours, and it's super informative, especially if you live in Edmonton. These are just my references here. Here I've also included some helpful links that I recommend visiting, especially if you're a resident in Edmonton and want to learn more about what you can do to be more sustainable.